On today's podcast, we're going to focus on creating culture, and joining me to discuss that topic is the head football coach at Eastern Illinois, Adam Cushing. Support for this episode comes from Modern Football Technology. Modern Football Technology provides real-time opponent tendencies and self-scout while eliminating manual data entry into Huddle, DV Sport, and Exos. If you're tired of tools that are time-consuming to learn and perform inconsistently at best, then we recommend Modern Football for a fresh perspective. Schedule a demo today at teammofo.com to see a battle-tested tool that's proven to perform and deliver value. Mention Coach and Coordinator Podcast or use the coupon code CC10 to receive 10% off your first year. And listen to our recent episode featuring Folsom High School defensive coordinator Jordan Ersick to learn more about how the 2023 California State Champion uses modern football to dominate their opponents. Coach, it's great to have you here.
Keith, I appreciate you having me today. Excited to get a chance to talk with you, and obviously always, being part of education for other coaches. I've gotten so much out of this type of stuff over the years that always happy to give back.
So, Coach, before we get into your topic today of creating culture, we really want to learn, what's brought you to this point. What are some of the things that have developed you along the way, the lessons you've learned, the influences you've had? So let's just start from the beginning for you and think back to that time when you had that idea that, you know what, I'm going to become a football coach. What was that for you? When did that happen?
It's a tough one, I guess, in a lot of ways, because growing up, my dad coached me in everything, and so I was always around it. And then he was a both collegiate and high school rugby coach throughout my entire life. So I was always around coaching and always saw my dad giving back to other young men, finding ways to help, whether that's financially or just, being that person there for them, having them over for dinner, all those little things that coaches do that no one ever sees, but that make the major impact. Then I went to Mount Carmel High School, never played a down of football before that, and got the good fortune to play for a legend in Frank Lenti. And that was when it was actually a Christian service project I did there, where I coached some Little League baseball in the off season, volunteered to do it, and just the interaction with young people, the opportunity to see them get better at something, the opportunity to see them grow through the game, and then just the way that I was coached, the good fortune I had to be coached with a lot of discipline, a lot of, love, but tough love, making sure that the comfort zone was never a place that you stayed in for very long, and making sure that always pushed to be my very, very best. So I think it was the combination of those two things, or three things, I guess, that between my dad, Coach Valenti, and his unbelievable staff that stayed with him for so long, and then the opportunity to start doing it, get a taste of it at 16 years old, that really made me think that, this opportunity to impact others through sport that I loved, played everything throughout my life, all the different sports that I could get my hands on, or whatever field or court I could get on, I wanted to do it. And so I thought if I could stay around the stuff that I love and do something truly meaningful, it would be a great life to live.
Well, that's definitely a good place to grow up and learn some ball. I had the opportunity to recruit at Carmel and meet Coach Lenti and watch a practice, and just some really good stuff going on there. Obviously, like you said, a legendary coach there in Illinois who just did an outstanding job. But as you got into this, Coach, and you look to some of those guys who mentored you along the way in this profession, who were those guys, and what are the key takeaways that you took in those lessons they imparted?
Yeah, well, Coach Lenti stayed with me, and still to this day is a mentor of mine, and that's super fortunate to have that, just somebody to bounce ideas off of, somebody that was always pushing me to grow as a coach, and in my young years, making sure that I wasn't made some young mistakes. We all did, but tried to help me learn and gave me those honest perspectives. So that was phenomenal to have outside of my direct bosses, the coaches that I worked for. You start with Don Morrell at the University of Laverne, my first job, and just the way that he cared for individuals. You could honestly say that the most important thing to Don was impacting young men and truly having the young men on our team know they were cared for on a daily basis. The wins came as a result of that. Then had the amazing fortune to be hired by Randy Walker at Northwestern University, and we lost him way too young. But coaching for Coach Walker was another man, very much like Frank Lenti, and that discipline, attention to detail, push outside your comfort zone were tenets of who he was, but at the same point, the unbelievable love he had for every single one of his players, I think was just fantastic to have that be my next jump, and truly my opportunity to go there. Coach Lenti again was instrumental in guiding me in that direction, getting the connections, all that type of stuff for me, and then spent 13 years working for Pat Fitzgerald after Coach Walker, and I don't know how much time we got on this podcast, but I could talk about the influence that Pat Fitzgerald's had in my life for forever here. But again, it uncompromising as a human being, just absolutely stands for the right things in the world, absolutely stands for caring for young men, truly wanting to develop each young man to be the best he can possibly be and commit to the cause greater than himself, and knew that the wins would only be a byproduct of that. If every single person gave their best and truly cared for the team above themselves in any football setting, that you can truly create some great wins on the field and have people, young men, understand what's important in life after football as a result of those lessons. So that's the Cliff Notes version. Believe me when I say there's about 4 volumes of information I could share on that, but I don't think anybody wants to hear all 4 volumes.
Well, you definitely had some incredible influences there in the men that you've mentioned, and after putting your time in at the various levels, the different positions you served in, you got the opportunity to become a head coach, and that's always something that you've learned. All those things, you like those things that other coaches do, but ultimately you have to do things that are going to be true to who you are as a person and what you believe. And there's probably a ton of that moves along with you, but you can't go out and be those guys. You have to be yourself. So what was it then that you've taken along really has become, I guess, the pillars, the foundation of your program and the culture you're developing?
Yeah, you know what I have built around here is the idea of, or at least wanted to, in the process of building, I shouldn't say built, I don't think it's never done, right? But is the central idea of focus on what's important now, and in all aspects, every minute of every day. If what's important now is studying for that test that you got tomorrow, if what's important now is, taking advantage of the opportunity to give back to the community, whether that's going over to the elementary school, reading a book, and these days reading a book over Zoom to the elementary students, doing Habitat for Humanity, all those little things, or whether what's important now is focusing on your very best underneath the squat bar, your very best when we're conditioning, your very best in that one rep, in that moment, that play, that singleness of focus. So what we have our entire culture based on around here is what's important now, and then stressing your personal best, not somebody else's, your personal best. And if you stretch your personal best just that 1% every single day, you have an opportunity for it to be better tomorrow, right? And so those are the foundations. And then we talk about what's important now, what's your best, how is passion, attitude, investment, and discipline. But then we get into the why, and that's for each other. And again, all those lessons that I talked about, right? That commitment to a cause greater than yourself really bleeds into how we go about our business around here at Eastern Illinois.
So, Coach, I want to dig into the culture a little bit, but you brought up something there, and I hadn't even thought about this. And sometimes the opportunities we have open up with some of the challenges we face, and we are in this virtual world right now. But you mentioned that your players or you reading to kindergartners virtually. It's something I can think back to the high school teams I coached, and we always had a day in the spring where we would send those guys out into the classrooms and read to the kids. Boy, it's something now that you could still do that. I think that's a unique thing. Are there other things that you've found like that? You guys are able to get involved maybe in a way that you hadn't thought of before?
That's probably the best example. What we have, our mantra has been around here since March. What does this make possible, right? Taking these quote unquote challenges and flipping them into opportunities, right? And so what does this make possible? It makes possible getting a lot more opportunities to read to a class, right? We can have every one of our players on a Zoom with a different class around town here. I mean, I've got 3 kids all in 3 different schools here around town. So there's enough schools, enough classrooms that need it. What does this make possible? Truly spreading out our influence and our opportunity to give back to the community. And so that's one of our tenets is we're always looking to give back, to whom much is given, much is expected. And so as we give back, we've just found different ways to do it. I mentioned Habitat for Humanity. We had a group of guys do that last week. It's different. You can only send 5 at a time, all those little things, but we're still finding ways to flip these into opportunities. And then we're doing the same thing when it comes to creating our connections within our football program. Obviously, there's lots of things in our new normal in our life that you can't do the way you used to do, but that doesn't mean you can't find a way to do it virtually or maybe even do it better virtually, right? And so we've done a lot of those things, and we found ways to get the most important topics in front of our guys and have honest conversations. And sometimes, we obviously during the quote unquote national quarantine, right, when most of the country had kind of taken a pause back in March, April, and May, that it gave an opportunity without the class conflicts to really engage our players on a personal level more virtually. And so I'm bouncing around from serving the community to truly creating the connections within the program. But again, it's all about what does this make possible? How can we turn this into an opportunity for each individual to be better and then us as a collective to be better?
So I think those are just great things, and I'm glad that coaches, not just you, that they're able to find a way to still do these things and stay involved. I think it's so important, and I think we all agree our game is important to our country because of all the difficulties we face and we see on TV and the media all the time. We know that our programs going to work differently, and it's a place where people really do come together and work together and share a common goal. I think we all wish the rest of the world would work more like our football programs.
You're not kidding. We say that, and I've said it since the beginning. If the world operated like a football locker room, I think that a lot of the issues that we face wouldn't be solved, but they'd be discussed in a normal manner, right? Without truly getting to a breaking point or creating unbelievable tensions. Just because we have a team, that does not mean there's an absence of conflict, right? An absence of conflict is not a good thing. It means people aren't talking the truth to one another. But I mean, we've done exercises around here to truly teach that ability to tell someone the truth. We've sat people pre-COVID, sat people 3 feet across from one another, forced them to look each other in the eye and tell them an uncomfortable truth. Tell them something that they do very well and tell them something that they don't think that they do well, that something that they have an opportunity to improve on. But again, if the world would just sit down and look each other in the eye and have some of these conversations without getting personal feelings involved, understanding that we're all working toward a common goal, I think that, as you said, that we'd be in a better place.
So, Coach, we talked about your culture and the things you believe in and are going to be a part of your program, but ultimately there's only one Adam Cushing. You got 10 other guys who interact in a much different way through your position coaches and your coordinators. So how do you empower them to implement that culture and meet those expectations?
Yeah, I think that's absolutely critical. You said it well. There's only one, and it's those guys. Probably one of my toughest lessons as a head football coach, and one of the tougher pills to swallow, is that I'm not going to have the same one-on-one relationship with the guys that I had as a position coach, right? As a head coach. So I have to empower the guys, and I think that's where it's critical to just keep it simple. And I talked through exactly what our culture was already. What's important now? Your best, passion, attitude, investment, discipline for each other. I have to be the chief repeating officer. I have to say it over and over and over again to the coaches so that they can go use those words, use those tenets with the young men, with the student athletes, so that and then constantly have follow-up, right? The difference between success and lack of is not great ideas. There's great ideas everywhere. The difference is true follow-through. So making sure that we're talking about culture and all of our staff meeting agendas when we sit down, I have on every single one, there's a culture, a culture heading, and we talk through it and we talk about what's going on from that lens specifically. So in order for every assistant coach to know exactly what it is, I've got to talk about it all the time. And quite frankly, and honestly, that was my biggest failing in my first year as a head football coach. Just looking self-critically, is not having it be clear. I tried to talk about every great idea that I've ever heard of over my almost 20-year college coaching career, and in the end, if everything is important, nothing is. So had to clarify, simplify, and give the guys the very, very simple message to convey to the players.
And I know that's something you're going to get into detail on in your clinic talk at the Illinois High School Football Coaches Association virtual clinic, but I think you make a really good point there, because the one thing there hasn't been a shortage of during this time, going back to almost immediately. I know I ran a virtual clinic with coachesclinic.com, and I had about 175 speakers over 3 weeks, and no shortage of information and great detail, and whether that's the X's and O's or the culture, the philosophy, all the different things you can do to build a team. I mean, as a coach, you take all those things in. I mean, I'm sitting with a bookshelf behind me filled with books by incredible coaches. But ultimately, it's like you said, you got to boil this down and simplify it to make it executable, right? I mean, execution on the field, you hear guys talk about that all the time, that, you have to be simple and execute the fundamentals. And, that's kind of true with culture and building a team as well, that you can't inundate these guys with all these different messages. And you walk into some places and you look at their weight room and what's on the walls and what's on the t-shirts, and you're like overwhelmed with like, exactly what are you guys about, man? There's a ton of messages here. So how do you keep it simple, true to all the things you believe, but like you said, simplify that message for these guys so that they can go out and do it?
Well, hopefully everyone doesn't have to do it like I did, which is, like I said, screw it up for an entire season. And what I did was, after our season, our first season, which is at this point our only season, is have the coaches and players fill out a survey and say, what is our culture? And the scariest thing happened when it came back, and there were about, with 100 and some players and 25 plus staff members, there were about 25 different answers, which means that I was giving 25 different directions. And so clarify, simplify. I mean, if you were you're in my office right now, you'd see my super complicated way of keeping this is I've got a little sticky note on my monitor that says clarify, simplify, hold coaches accountable to it. Right. And so it's just a daily reminder to not let the things that you don't believe, or that aren't most important. Right. Again, go back to the mantra of what's important now, to truly have that stuff take a back seat. And again, there's a million good ideas out there, and that doesn't make them wrong. It just makes it impossible to lead to. And so the focus, as soon as I got that, the focus was, okay, then what does matter, right? And some of it, I can use all the excuses in the world, but maybe it's an opportunity for someone else to learn from my mistakes. As we scuffled along, and literally missed winning a game by an inch. The ball was marked down on the 1 inch line. We had furious fourth quarter comebacks, and then just come up again, just a point or two short. I mean, just kept on. We were so close. I just kept searching for the right answer and kept looking for a different answer rather than going back to do what we do. No excuses, no explanations. This is who we are. And so it just comes down to spending a bunch of time. I've got a couple of staff members, we all talked through it, but, kind of tried to create an even smaller almost a working group. And I just kept bouncing my ideas off of them and saying, okay, I'm at this. And just once we finally arrived on it, no bend, no adding to okay, yeah, you're right. That is a great idea, but I'm not talking about that every day. Here's what I'm talking about every single day. And then making sure, I literally say to the coaches at times, okay, this is, what we're talking about today. Today's an attitude day. Every coaching point comes from that, because passion, attitude, investment, discipline, those are our 4 pillars. Let's talk, okay, today is your best day. That's all we're going to talk about all day. So just making sure that when it is simple enough that you can go out and execute on it every single day.
So, Coach, going back to that sticky note on your computer, if you would share that again one more time, say what's the message on there.
Yeah, it's 3 bullet points. It's clarify / simplify. It's hold coaches accountable below it, and then the third one is create connection. And that was a little bit of the product of we've got to create connection within the team, player to player, player to coach. But as I said, in the first year as a head football coach, didn't have those relationships. And that's truly what I'm in it for, is the relationships, the opportunity to influence and impact. And so if I don't create connection with the young men, and if we aren't trying to have them connect with one another, our why won't get executed. The for each other, which is the why, it won't get executed without a basis of connection and trust first.
So the other bullet, and I'd like to touch on it, hold coaches accountable. And, that word accountability, I think because it's done wrong, I think more than anything, it's taken on a negative connotation, right? When you talk to a group of people and, we're going to be accountable, everybody kind of gets nervous. Like, what does that mean? Am I going to lose my job? And, so I think there's some key things to doing accountability right. Because accountability is good for everybody. It's good for the individual. It's good for the program. But as I said, and actually talked to some guys about that on this podcast before, that, it's done so wrong. It has that negative connotation. So how do you do accountability the right way?
It's making sure that we all clearly understand what the goals are, what the message is in this case, right? And what we're talking about from a culture perspective. I'm going to use the example and then go a little broad stroke. But if every single coach knows exactly what it is, then reinforcing that on a daily basis, that's what accountability is just saying that this is what we all are saying. It's very easy. And I'm as I said last season, the biggest offender of it, of straying from that, because there's other great messages out there. So just making sure that our actions and our words are constantly reflecting what we say our goals are, what each individual's goals are, And that's, again, part of the create connection. The easiest way to hold someone accountable, whether that be a coach or a player, is know exactly what their goal is and say, do your actions and meet your goals. Do your actions reflect your goals? And so just making sure that on a daily basis, I'm not only monitoring and constantly pushing the coaches toward the culture and the goals, but then having a follow-up conversation to say, okay, what can we do better here, right? And making sure that we're all talking and that we're all hearing it, and that everybody is understands that we're all being held accountable to it. It's not just that where you said accountability can have the negative connotation. It comes from when an individual has that bias that I'm the only one being held accountable here. We're all being held accountable to the same standard of behavior, the same standard of excellence. And if we have open conversations about that, all of a sudden accountability has a piece of for each other, right? Of our why. The accountability is to something and to someone, as well as yourself.
And I kind of like where you put accountability on that list with, the simplify, clarify above and the connection below. Because when you think about it, those parts are actually critical to the accountability. I think people lose their way when it's not simple and clarified, right? It's hard to tell exactly what should I be doing to make sure I'm meeting the goals, the standards of the program. And then on the other side, the accountability without the connection, you need the connection. You need the relationship, right? Where you're going to go out and coach a player up and even coach a player up hard because you're trying to get him to the standard. You don't have that connection. You don't have that relationship. That's going south pretty quickly because all you're doing now is the guy's going to feel like all I do is get hammered. Like when in reality, it's I'm here to help you get better, right? I'm here because we have a relationship, we have a respect, we have a trust, we care about each other. So I think you've placed that well on your list. I don't know if it was intentional, but to me, it makes a lot of sense.
I would say probably a year ago, I wouldn't have said it was intentional. I was pretty intentional with what direction how I placed those things and every word. And you start with clarify, simplify. I tried to make it the words, even on my sticky notes, simple enough and clear and very concise so that I could go act on it. And I think that's the end, right? Is that if it isn't, you were saying, if there's so much going on, right? The great phrase, a wealth of knowledge can create a poverty of attention. You're only paying attention to a little tiny bit of everything. Then you're not actually going to improve on it. You're not actually going to have an opportunity to grow. And I think the other part that you said, right, the connection piece, it's critical. It's critical. Servant leadership is the essence of coaching. And the definition of that is they don't care how much you know until they know how much you care, right? And so I'm always being held accountable. Why is this guy always doing this? Well, because we want the best for you. But there has to be a belief in that. There has to be true trust that that's the case. And that takes time. It does. It takes time to truly build that interpersonal connection. Anybody that gets it done overnight did it at too superficial a level, in my opinion, to creating that trust.
Yeah. And I think you would agree, Coach, that when you look at an individual who in some way is missing on that accountability, isn't exactly where you need him to be, whether that's a player or a coach, I think you need to reflect as well as back to those other things, right? Did I clarify this enough? Did I make a mistake in this? Have I developed this relationship enough that he cares, that he knows I care, et cetera, that the way those are intertwined, I think are critical. And it's not all then, it's a shared responsibility, I guess is what I'm saying. It's not all on that individual. You're in it together. And so sometimes, and I find this with, the younger players you get in your program, sometimes you got to say it to them differently, that for whatever reason, they don't have that clarity on it, or for whatever reason, they don't feel that connection. And it's very important that even though it's hold accountable, that those other things have to keep improving as well.
I could not agree with you anymore that the first thing that we all, and starting with me, have to do is say, if they're not getting it, why is that? Right. And so when I come and sit back down at my desk and going, we're not getting it. Okay. And once again, there's my sticky note that's, starting to lose its stick. Clarify, simplify. Did that happen? Okay. If I can honestly say that the answer is yes, then did I hold the coaches accountable enough on a daily basis to actually pound this message in? And then if I could say, yeah, that's absolutely true, then the issue is connection, right? But if it's got to be one of those three things, because again, if I start looking outside of that, I'll spend too much time drifting and not having a firm direction. But in the end, whatever the issue is, I'm going to look to one of those three things to solve it. And that will give us a chance to have the clearest path forward and the quickest path forward, right? If you look for 20,000 different solutions, you may take a week before you create any direction forward. But if you sit down and say, well, it either wasn't clear enough, the coaches weren't held accountable to it, meaning they weren't doing it and being clear enough, or there's no trusting relationship, we got to do one of those three things better, and then it'll be 1% better tomorrow.
Coach, you're going into detail on some of these things. I know we probably touched on a little bit here, but again, I mentioned you're going to be speaking at the Illinois High School Football Coaches Association virtual clinic in December. It's the first big clinic of this off season. Obviously, we're virtual because of where we're at right now with the pandemic. But December 8th through 12th, IHFCA coachesclinic.com. The topic you have: creating culture, clarify, simplify, and what does this make possible? What's I guess without giving away everything, just a short overview of some of the things that you'll get into beyond some of what we already talked about.
Well, it's truly a lot of what we've already talked about, but then I'm going to talk a lot about the mistakes from that first year and how, the process of identifying the mistakes, identifying the path forward, identifying how you simplify, right, and taking what we had, with a 10 word, pyramid built off of Wooden's deal and all these other things that was so complex, and into truly boiling it down to what matters and what's actionable, right? And then what does this make possible? Again, just talking about that mantra, especially in a virtual space where that's all we can do, is what does this make possible? How do we find different ways of engagement? How do we turn things from challenges to opportunities? How do we say, and especially in places where there's all sorts of coaches around the country, myself included, that didn't have a fall football season this year, and yet, what does this make possible? Well, shoot, we got to have a quote unquote spring football model with a bunch of freshmen that usually just get thrown into the deep end. So focusing very specifically on what does this make possible and leveraging those things to our advantage, right? So once again, getting simple with it. What does this make possible? Figure out what the great parts of the challenges that were going on, what opportunities does that create, and what can we use to our specific advantage, and then drive it home, play to our strengths. We're not going to win football games by playing to our weaknesses. We're going to win football games by playing to our strengths. So we got to do the exact same thing when it comes to an entire program perspective.
Because this is a great topic. I'm looking forward to seeing it at the clinic. To tie things up, Coach, and I told you I'd be asking you this question, but of all the things you do, and maybe you've mentioned it already, but what's the one thing you do as a coach that is going to help your team find the winning edge?
Well, I think that the best thing is quite honestly putting into place and hiring coaches, as you said before. I can't do it alone. I don't do it alone. Is hiring coaches and staff members with two things in mind, right? Again, clarify, simplify. Two things in mind. Most important, by far and away, most important is that it is a person that firmly believes in servant leadership, firmly believes in that they don't care how much you know until you know how much they care, firmly believes in the football coaching victories on the field will come as a byproduct of developing the whole person. And evaluating that is not an overnight thing. That's either a personal relationship, which there's a reason there's so many of the staff members here that I've had a long-standing personal relationship with. And then number two is a great teacher, right? Because that's the essence of what we're doing, is trying to take, whether that be real world concepts, whether that be, life after football concepts or football concepts, and teach them in terms that young men can understand. And so if you are a great human being that cares first and foremost about the development of each individual player, and that you're a great teacher, we will be successful. And the great part is I can confidently, with 100% certainty, say that our entire staff, whether that be our defense coordinator all the way down to our graduate assistants, our operations department, everybody here holds to those two tenets, and we're going to be successful. And more importantly, the young men are going to be successful in life after football as a result.
Coach, for our listeners out there, what's the best way for them to connect with you?
Best way, I'm on Twitter at Coach Cushing, and certainly always looking for for more support for our program. But more specifically, if guys have questions, that's a great way to reach out to me. And truly, I'm a product of, as I mentioned, all the mentors, but then all of the different information that has been shared with me along the way. So I'm an open book. Our program's an open book. It's all about making others better as a result of us living our day-to-day life. So please reach out. More than happy to continue to share everything that we have here.
Coach, I appreciate you taking the time. I'm really looking forward to seeing more of this at the virtual clinic, and best of luck to you guys here as you get things going for hopefully a spring kickoff in 2021.
I appreciate everything, Keith. I really do. And you mentioned it already, but that virtual clinic, that lineup is absolutely unbelievable. I'm looking forward to an opportunity to learn at that thing as well. So can't emphasize enough that how great that's going to be for coaches across the country.
Thank you again for listening to the Coaching Coordinator Podcast. Please, if you are enjoying the podcast, head over to iTunes or Spotify and click 5-star for rate. If you have a minute, write a review. It really helps the podcast. Check out our new home for the Coaching Coordinator Podcast. That's at coachandcoordinator.com. And follow me on Twitter at Coach K. Grabowski.